Welcome back to this final interview at Streaming Media West 2019. I'm Tim Siglin, contributing editor with Streaming Media Magazine and the founding executive director of the not-for-profit Help Me Stream. And today I'm honored to have with me Yuriy Reznik. Yuriy is at Brightcove. And Yuriy, what's your title at the company?
I'm a technology fellow, and I'm also head of research.
Okay. And a lot of your focus has been around how to make encoding better. And there's something called CAE. What does CAE stand for?
Well, at Brightcove, it stands for Context-Aware Encoding.
Okay.
And what it means, it is really end-to-end optimization where the encoding is done in a way such that we take into account characteristics of the content as well as characteristics of the delivery context, such as distributions of network bandwidth as well as characteristics of audience.
Okay.
Things like how many viewers are watching it, how they are watching it, on which devices, with which resolutions, if this is streaming for PC devices, for example. So considering plurality of all characteristics that matters that contribute to quality of experience.
So that holistic approach is not just the context of the video itself or the content awareness, it's the awareness of the dynamic network as
Absolutely.
well.
It's a awareness of the entire context of delivery of this video to the audience and to this particular operator.
Okay. So when you get to the encoding scenarios, obviously I've worked in that space as well. There are latencies that are sort of activated inherently by having to look at a frame or a couple frames. How does that juxtapose against low latency? I mean, is there a way to sort of do both of those, achieve low latency and get the additional benefits of encoding?
Well, I'll put it this way. Latency and high quality encodings are things in the opposite ends.
Okay.
If you want to do a high quality encoding, you really need to have look ahead. And look, if you look at video conferencing codecs, which are examples of codecs for extremely low latency delivery case, they don't even have B frames, for example.
Right.
They operate with latency of a single frame. And in case of streaming, we're talking about look aheads by 10 or 20 frames ahead.
To a group of picture model.
And in some cases, it's a full 2-pass or multi-pass encode of entire video before it's even ready for
having come out of video conferencing with the whole I-frame, P-frame model, you're absolutely right. The goal was get it there as absolutely fast as possible. And obviously from the quality standpoint, it suffered significantly, or you had to raise the bandwidth quite significantly. Speaking of high bandwidth, what about UHD, ultra high definition? How is that sort of playing into some of the models that you're working at with this holistic approach to content-aware encoding?
Well, Ultra HD certainly needs more bandwidth, and Ultra HD also brings the need to actually support multiple formats, because the space of Ultra HD has multiple modalities. There is HDR, there is HDR10, there is Dolby Vision. By the way, there are several flavors of it. For example, 5.0 that's supported by Apple devices, 8.1 which is HDR10 backwards compatible, and so on.
Gamma log,
And then there is, of course, HLG, SLHDR1, and so
many
on.
acronyms.
And so on. So basically, it is a complex. And by the way, in addition to HDR, you most likely will also need to down-convert same content to SDR and send it as a backup option to those clients that cannot have HDR capability.
Okay.
So it really multiplies the space by plurality of these formats, and some of these encodes could be done as a late binding types of addition of metadata. For some cases you can't do it. You really need to do signal processing operations and transcode them separately.
Okay, very interesting. So will Ultra HD push us towards HEVC, or will we as the industry figure out a way to use something like H.264 to do to do 4K? What's your general sense on that?
Well, technically, if you look at Ultra HD guidelines, there is really no requirement on the use of particular codec, and both HEVC as well as H.264 have complete same set of SAI messages and VUI type of metadata that otherwise needed to communicate different flavors of HDR. So in principle, there is no bias, but in practice, of course, many device manufacturers only implemented, for example, HEVC, and that drives the decisions down the encoding and distribution side.
So I had an earlier guest on here who was talking about having HEVC encoders and contribution to the cloud that way. Having HEVC devices at the end that can watch it, but not really having CDNs in the middle who handle HEVC very well. Is your sense that we'll get there? Because it does seem like most wide-scale distribution is geared toward A, fragmented, B, H.264. Do you sense that there's that limitation that CDNs aren't really handling delivery of HEVC at scale?
Well,
and you're at an OVP, so.
Yeah, well, I'm a bit puzzled by the idea of sending HEVC without CDNs. If that is the case, then probably it's done by also means of different delivery protocols, perhaps not Dash or HLS.
Sure.
If we talking about traditional HTTP streaming, the cheapest and most efficient and scalable way of doing it so far was by using CDNs, and the other question could be that if you have multiple formats, the plurality of same content and different versions of the content will start compete at CDN inch, and then you just have diminishing performance of CDN because of this.
Okay.
Well, if that's a concern, well, then you just need to use CDNs properly or use multiple CDNs, and for example send one content over one CDN, the other content over the other, or do some other arrangements with CDN operators to make it efficiently.
Okay, very good. So the one thing I started to mention before we went on air is about these articles that I'm going to be writing. After you and I and Michelle, my fiance, sat down for lunch in Amsterdam at IBC, and she got this big grin on her face when you started doing a math formula, I went back to Eric and asked him if we could do a series of articles in 2020 around the algorithms that underlie CDNs, that underlie player performance, and the like. And he said, will that be highly technical? I said, well, it'll involve math, which means I'll have to ask her to check my math. But we're going to try this year to sort of go back to our roots and actually do some of those hardcore types of articles around that. I'm probably going to be calling on you for some information on that.
My pleasure. I think it's a wonderful idea. I really do think so. Naturally, highly technical, highly detailed papers are produced in quantities by academic community, but I think there is a fantastic space in the middle to popularize concepts that are useful and will help generation of engineers who are working on these problems now to design systems more efficiently.
And even perhaps help, from a layman's standpoint, the marketers and the salespeople, if we can explain it simply enough to understand that the math itself isn't scary, it's just a descriptive way to shorthand particular things too as
Absolutely.
well. So,
absolutely.
Yuriy, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Look forward to
it's a
talking
pleasure.
to you.